Welcome back to the 40% Better podcast, where we talk about leadership and career success. And that gives us a pretty broad range of things that we can get into. Today, I've got Suresh on the podcast. He's got an awesome story. I love his resilience. I love his ability to communicate and the way he's so eloquent when he presents ideas and when he's thinking through problem solving. It's very cool. Um, Here's our episode, and as always, thanks for listening.
The thing that I always want to know when I have guests on the podcast is what's your origin story? Like, what got you to be thinking about doing what it is you're doing today?
Mhm.
And how long ago did you start thinking about it before you got to I'm really going to go do this thing?
I always wanted to get into business, always. As a child, my dad was in business and marketing, so I kind of learned a lot from him. And this was in Kuwait growing up. He worked in very interesting positions like newspaper companies, business companies. Back in the day, WWE was known as WWF, and he was part of the company that actually brought WWF for the first time to the Middle East, like the wrestlers and stuff like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Um, and even when he was part of the newspaper, it was like one of the top two newspapers in Kuwait. There were articles with world leaders, and some of those editorial work he also got to do.
Mhm.
And he would give it to me to proofread. And I was this 8, 9-year-old kid. Like, this is neat, exciting. And a lot of jingles, commercials, exposure to a lot of stuff. So I kind of knew I wanted to do that. But my origin is still Indian. So there are two professions for the most part you get to choose, engineering or doctor. And engineering happened to be one of them. I personally wanted to be an astronaut growing up as a child. And so I said, okay, how can I marry both being an astronaut and engineering? Aerospace engineering became the thing. So after high school, I came to the US to study aerospace engineering. Right after I came, 9/11 happened. The FBI came knocking on my door because I more or less fit the profile. I came from the Middle East, came to learn aerospace engineering. So it was just like a lot of things. And my parents were like, do you still want to continue being an aerospace engineer? I said, let me get into mechanical engineering and let's see if the weather settles, the dust settles. And I joined the space program at ASU, working on Mars satellite, the solar cell deployment on a Mars sat.
Oh, very cool.
Right. And this is with NASA and JPL. And this was a few years later where India became a nuclear country. So people with Indian passports, even though I lived in Kuwait for 16 years, I still had an Indian passport. And they said, if you have an Indian passport, you cannot work for NASA or JPL funded projects. I'm like, okay, another fork in the road. So then I switched to electrical. I did well. I was very fortunate. I got into a company designing circuits, analog circuits. And then I also ended up moving to the Bay Area, California back in 2007. I worked at Xilinx. And I always had this itch of being in business and starting my own company. In 2015, I got a chance to get into IoT and then back into the FPGAs in 2017. And around 2018, I decided I was done. But I was in charge of a global organization with people across the US and one who ended up going to Denmark. And I wanted to make sure that they would be taken care of even without me. And then it was my turn. Around 2021 is when some of those pieces fell in place. One person who reported to me, I made sure that she was promoted to a grade level higher than me. Another person who was kind of being pushed out, even by the previous manager and by the organization, turned him into a high performer and highly sought after individual in the company. So he got a position in a different organization. So it's like, okay, now it's my turn. So in 2021 is when I really started actively figuring out. So all of this fell in place. These two individuals and the remaining team, they were in place by Jan. And then by March, I started thinking, what can I do? And I came across this one person who was giving a speech to Carnegie Mellon alumni, where my wife is she's an alma mater from Carnegie Mellon. And he very quickly showed in 45 minutes how to set up a website. Say if you're selling skateboards, how do you go about doing that? How do you do your market research on Reddit and what have you? And just start your business. So I was thinking, okay, I'm in tech and whatnot. I can build a tech product, but there's just so many layers. And it was just a light bulb moment. What if I'm the product? The variables are less. Let's give career coaching a go and see where it takes me. It's 2024. On October 15th will be 3 years since I started Grow You now.
Nice.
I've had corporate deals, a lot of individuals. And as of yesterday, there's someone who from 209K total comp has accepted an offer at 385K total comp.
Nice.
Companies that I've worked with have saved millions of dollars in terms of operational efficiency, productivity, conflict resolution, whatnot. And it just started with having this basic idea that I wanted to do business, live the American dream, and just plunge in. And a lot of well-wishers and people who helped me along the way, who trusted me, gave me that opportunity. And here I am with Bill today talking about how I got here. So it's been a lot of hard work, but life has been very rewarding. And people like you have helped me along the way.
Oh, awesome. That totally makes sense. And that's it. Your resilience with all the different parts and pieces and staying true to your vision. That's awesome. That's a huge testament to you, because people oftentimes when they bump into that struggle place will just go, it's not for me, and they walk away, and they don't have the values and priorities to keep going forward, because they've got this important thing that's dragging them, that's magnetic and pulls them in. That's super awesome. I'm still thinking about your origin story, and I'm like stuck there. I'm like, oh my God, the next question in my head is not popping up. When you're working with clients, like, what are the kinds of clients that are the easiest or the most fun, or like, do you prefer to work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really find this to be universally true. Most of the clients that come to me, in a general sense, need coaching the least. Everybody needs coaching, people who work in corporate. But I find the most people who come to me need it the least, because they already have baseline value systems. They already know that they want to work hard. They already know that they want to be a better colleague, a better leader. So they already kind of are aware of what needs to happen. They might not know the intricate details and some of the things that they don't know.
Sure.
So for example, I need to speak well, I need to have better body posture. They have a good sense. But then people like you and me, we have actually gone to the dungeons, we have paid our dues, we have studied every single detail inside out, right? And if I were to use fire as an analogy, we have not walked on fire. We have not gone through fire. We have become fire in terms of what does it take to now precisely be resilient? What does it take to actually convince others in 2 minutes or less? What does it take to actually prioritize? What are those techniques? It's not just for saying, it's not like a 30-second reel or 60-second reel. We know precisely how to do it because we have failed so many more times than others have even tried. So I really like clients who know that they want to improve, and they come with an open mind to learn and observe. Those are the kind of clients that I like.
It's so fascinating that the way that you phrase that is that they need the least coaching. That's such an interesting observation. And it sounds like these are people that, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but it's really like people that already have a growth mindset,
right?
And they don't need to learn that growth mindset is a thing. They already understand this idea of constant learning, and just as a baseline, that's beautiful, because so many people get stuck in the I already know everything, fixed mindset, mental space, and then they don't move forward and they can't figure out why. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's yeah. The way that you talk about this is really eloquent. Like whatever the communication training experience, practice in the weeds that you've had is really good. Yeah. Props to your dad for getting you started on the
Oh my goodness.
on the marketing language thing, because you do it really well. It's super inspiring. I'm like, holy cow, this is great. This guy really, like, he actually speaks about this stuff really, really well. Yeah, that's so cool. I think we underestimate in the workplace how important effective communication is. I mean, I certainly have seen that in my work over and over again, where people assume that because they have a good idea that it's a requirement that people pay attention to them.
Goodness, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and yet, but because they can't communicate that idea well, that for everybody else it doesn't make sense, and they don't listen. And that, I think that's it's a huge barrier in people's careers, and it's refreshing when I hear somebody who's able to do that kind of stuff. You know, I'm like, oh, thank God. I'm so glad to hear this. For the people that need the most coaching, that aren't coming to you, what do you think the frictions are for them that they're not having the perspective of, I need to get somebody to help me and coach me on my career?
That's a great question. And I think I want to answer it in two ways, two elements. One, what you already said a few seconds ago, which is these people already have the right answers, but they're not able to convince people on those right answers. Just because the data proves that we have to take the next step or build a product or change the features or line it up doesn't guarantee that people will listen to you. So the fact that they already have answers, they're more focused on other people are the problem. They don't understand my answers. They're not competent. So they're unable to really reflect that they might be the problem in convincing others. Number one. And I think second is perhaps more important, but it's tied to the first one, which is typically when you work in a corporation, unlike you and me, if we run our own business, if you work in a corporation, all said and done, you are detached from the consequences. The worst set of consequences that you can face are you getting laid off because over time, people see that you're not pulling your weight, or for whatever illogical reason, they want to get rid of you. But when you're making decisions, when it comes to product, when it comes to people leadership, your salary, you're still getting your salary for the most part. In most companies, you'll still get your bonus. Because we're detached from the consequences when we work in a company, natively, you're not going to be able to make the best potential decisions and judgments that you can as a professional working in a corporation. I'll take a pause. Any immediate thoughts, comments, or questions there?
That's a really interesting perspective, that lack of skin in the game, or perceived lack of skin in the game.
Right.
That's interesting. How do you, two questions. The first one is, how do you change that? Right? How do you shift their mindset to where they believe they have skin in the game, number one? And then number two, the folks that come to you for coaching, do they think they have skin in the game? Or what is their mental model that's different?
Great question. Both are great. In fact, I never thought about the second one. Like, people, when they come to me, do they think they have skin in the game?
Yeah.
Can I answer that first?
Sure.
Yeah. I believe when they come to me, and in the perspective of having skin in the game, they think of it from their own lens. Either they're tired with management, or they're tired with the direction, like where the product is going, or how the business objectives are changing. So they're like, what is in for me?
Right.
And that is the skin in the game that they are able to see very clearly. And and rightfully so. And I think everyone it's helpful for people to see it that way, because at the end of the day, it's business, it's not charity. But before a tech company or biotech company or lawyer firm or whatever that might be, seeing that skin in the game, people are able to do. But now, do they see skin in the game in terms of for the company perspective? And I don't think companies have done themselves any favor. They have not necessarily treated employees and people favorably for them to even feel that way. But I think this is a missed opportunity when companies, when they allow people to have skin in the game. They could be monetary skin in the game. There are so many other ways to actually apply that, right? In terms of, when I'm actually taught in corporate, employees didn't pay, but the fact that the company invested in their career development, that was them having skin in the game. So they were thrilled by that. I cannot tell you how many times where an employee would come and be like, I'm going to try to use politically correct terms. I was displeased by the other stakeholder. I was displeased by my manager's behavior. I felt like I was like in a corner and I had to like escape. And I'm the coach paid by the company, and they're opening up to me, right? So my question to them was, someone's bad behavior is going to allow you to tarnish your own brand. Your habits make you. Now, you have the right to be upset and disgruntled that they did you wrong, or they are making your life hard, or they're not giving you the right technical or managerial resources to execute your job. And you're going to retaliate by providing a subpar presentation, output, technical code, whatever that might be. And you're repeatedly doing this. Guess what? Your best is actually going to reduce, and that's going to become your new best. Why are you hurting yourself because of other people's bad behavior? Now they're like, okay, I have skin in the game. Regardless of how my manager treats me, I need to be better so that if I apply to another job, I have the right skills and experience to apply. But guess what? The company gets back in return, a high-performing individual, regardless of the environment, good or bad. That is one way perhaps to have skin in the game.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds like enlightened self-interest.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I read that term years ago, some book that I was reading about how to be a better leader. And the author framed things in the context of be selfish and really be out for yourself, but recognize how you being the result of you being out for yourself is a result of you taking really good care of the rest of the people. And so to your point, yeah, if you're doing great work, even if your boss is a horrible communicator, in the long run, you get the value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's so funny. I actually had an experience like that at a company. I had a horrible manager. And it was tough. It was super tough, but there was a bunch of other stuff relying on my work. And I really focused on minimizing the damage from him and really focused on getting my work done and doing it well and taking care of the rest of the ecosystem.
Right.
And yeah, exactly to your point. Number one, I learned a ton. And number two, I helped a bunch of other people be successful.
Wow.
And that was the big win, right? Like ultimately that was the big win, was helping all these other people be successful. And I was like, okay, the price I got to pay is and at the same time I'm learning, don't be like that guy.
Precisely.
Yeah. Right. It's like, that's exactly the pattern to avoid in my own behavior, no matter what, and then part of that also became, okay, what are the things that I need to set up as systems in my own organizations, in my own teams in the future to not have that ever happen? And, it's like the preemptive prophylactic setup so that kind of stuff can never happen. So, on the one hand, I should write him a thank you note someday.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. For teaching, and I have no idea how he saw it. Like, I know he was stressed at times. I don't think he understood how much he was creating the problem. And so, I was like, and I was having one-on-ones with the CEO about it. And he was like, well, he's your boss, and I'm not going to fire him because he's important to the company, and you're going to have to figure out a way to make it work. Um, and so ultimately I did. But yeah, it was because I was thinking like, okay, what's the big benefit driver for me? Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Bill. And this is why I see it. You said that they were stressed or they were triggered, so their lizard brain was up. They most likely are not seeing the ramifications of their actions. They're oblivious. I truly believe this. Everyone's good. Good people are capable of doing bad things. So in your case, when you had a bad behaving boss is good, but his behavior was bad, it is worth calming the lizard brain down and making them feel safe. So what you end up engaging with is the best possible version of them.
I like that frame. That's really good. Yeah.
You're just streamlining, becoming more, you're creating a much more successive environment first before you get into it. That's your best shot. Or you can be disgruntled and pile up more of the negativity from the other person, and you're just dealing with much more weight.
Right. Yeah, and it just makes them more stressed, and then it
compounds.
It compounds, and your life gets worse and worse. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of being proactive about solving problems,
right?
And not just complaining about stuff,
right?
And
as I think a lot of us are in tech, or for the viewers who are in tech, our education, both from elementary, middle, high school, college, and even at work, we're trained to be a hammer to a nail when we see a problem. So we're very reactive solving. We've been rewarded for that. The faster you can get the answer, you're rewarded for that. So that's what's going to happen in all these cases. However, if you take a step back and realize there is no obligation to answer, but it helps to respond, those are two very different things. So what I mean by that is, in these difficult situations, don't go and try to solve a difficult situation. First, ask questions and do what it takes to eliminate the difficult part, and then deal with the situation or conversation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think because that guy was so bad, like, that changed how I thought about dealing with whatever leadership I had from then on. So I would just never have that situation happen again.
I can totally see that, right? We all have traumas. We can never get over them completely. We can minimize, we can mitigate. But I'm going to drop another quote. Something scares you, go do it regardless, and then build the courage. And then build the courage. Going back to the very beginning, how we started the conversation, right? Rather than trying to build courage and then doing what scares you, do what scares you regardless. And the more you keep doing it, it's like muscle memory. Then you build the courage over time.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's 100% true. That's totally true. Yeah, and that's it feels to me like that's not a common conversation.
No.
And so people tend to think in terms of, oh, if it's scary, I shouldn't do it. And that becomes a barrier to their success. And a lot of the stuff that I've heard you talk about so far is, and including your own journey, is, there's this place that could very well have been scary. And you made a set of choices to say, I'm going to move forward into that place, even though it is scary, in whatever level of stuff I can do. And ultimately you get all the rewards for it.
Yeah.
There's no rewards. There's no rewards for avoiding the scary.
No, it actually it's the opposite. It will catch up to you.
Yeah.
And I do want to, for your viewers, give you like a reality check. Like whatever I'm able to say is because I have the luxury of a support system.
Right.
And if I don't, then I've heard enough to know that I need to go find one.
Right. Right.
So when I think about coaching, there's one where we think about, can I get someone to help me either figure out my business better, or figure out my career path better, or figure out how do I deal with the toxic boss better, or deal with the toxic employee better. There is that aspect. But I think what we end up needing more than anything is a tribe that we can fall on. We don't need the tribe to come and do things for us, but knowing that they're in the back there to catch us in case if we fall is tremendous amount of value. And I think there's a lot of value in even creating a tribe amongst peers, amongst the industry, like on LinkedIn or even on social media. And I think that's the value. Once you know that, then you can say, I'll go do something that scares me.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's interesting because are you an only child or do you have siblings?
I have an older sister who's 9 years, 9 months, 9 days older to me, but she's like a second mom.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I wonder. I really like the tribe idea, and at the same time, one of the things that I've noticed has been that you have to be really. You have to apply filtration to make sure that you're getting into the tribe that's going to actually help you move forward.
My goodness.
What?
You got to say that louder and multiple times. That is so true. That is so very true.
Because there's lots of tribes out there. And I just had this experience this morning. I'm part of a tribe of software team leads. And there's this whole thread, this whole section that's people complaining about what I perceive as supremely solvable problems. Like none of them are very big. And the volume of complaints and the people going, yeah, it shouldn't be like that. I was like,
yeah,
maybe I'm in the wrong room because it completely doesn't resonate for me. I'm like, wait a minute, like
boom, boom.
Yeah, they like solve it. And so even if the tribe is much smaller, that it's actually going to help me move forward in the direction I need to go, I think is the high value.
Oh my goodness, right. You're right.
And it's not about the volume. It's about the quality. It's a quality versus quantity. And for me, the quality is so critically important.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting because I've just like this group that I'm seriously thinking about leaving that group just because this is not the first time I've had this experience.
I see.
With that group. And I'm like, and I've posted stuff in there and said like, oh, here's 3 ways to solve the problem. And people have been pissed.
That you solved the problem, right?
Yeah. They're pissed that I've solved the problem. They're like, well, you're not honoring the fact that this sucks for me. And I'm like, well,
right.
So what? I mean, I don't want to be cruel, but I'm also like, well, that's because complaining will never get you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
And
I think I want to because I know you a little bit, but enough to say that you still care about people and what they think and how they feel. So that I think has already happened, that you acknowledge their frustration, acknowledge their complaint, but you're the kind of person who knows to move on. And then you gave the solution. So it's not like you are insensitive, like why you're complaining. You know that it's a problem. And I think that's something that I want your listeners to know, that if there's anyone who actually gives daylight to what people care and think, and I hardly know you, but I feel that you care more than even I can care. You kind of give that vibe that you are such a genuine person. So you have already done and established that. Let us not
Thank you.
let's not bathe in negativity. Let's move forward. You're
Yeah.
the kind of person. So when you were describing this to me, you made me feel this out of body experience where, yeah, there are very few of us. And let me add this other part. This is perhaps in Art of War, fact check me, but in a battlefield, if there are 100 people, only 10 fight.
Right.
One of them is a warrior, the main warrior. The rest 90 are bodies. Same thing in companies as well.
Yeah.
They are valuable. They're human beings. They are important. They have some value, right? And they have important value too. But the work does get done by the top 10%. And there is one warrior that gets stuff done.
Mhm.
We need not think too much about this. We need not judge others about this. But if we know what role we play in society or in a company, we play a role, we make sure that we give respect and command respect, and we move on.
Right.
It's my
Right.
philosophy. That's what I've been embracing over the last 2 years.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's totally true. And I think the biggest challenge for companies is when they have people who are getting a lot of the work done, it's
Mhm.
keeping them.
Oh, you're again 100% right.
Yeah,
It's keeping them.
Yeah, it's you the company has to be, they have to be understanding how to reward and recognize and challenge,
Right.
people to get them to stay. I have this, I've never said this publicly before, so this is going to be interesting to get your feedback.
Mhm.
I am, and it actually goes to the point you were just talking about. The data to me looks like once, like companies start off and they're early stage startups and they're looking for amazing talent,
Mhm.
and fast growth early stage startups they're very demanding environments. And so people self-select like whether or not they can survive and thrive in that environment, right? At some point in time, and people talk about hiring A players, really you're hiring people that really like that environment, right? Is how I would put it. It seems to me that once companies grow beyond a certain point, the kind of people they're hiring starts to change, and they go from hiring people who want to be in that high production warrior kind of space to people who are much more safety oriented, and they're much less production oriented, and they're much less risk tolerant. And then the whole culture of the business changes. And
It does.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear you say that.
It's a very natural progression.
Yeah.
It seems very biological, if that even makes sense.
Yeah. And it feels like when that happens, like there's a whole series of negative knock-on effects. Like leadership becomes less effective throughout the org chart. You're getting people in leadership roles that aren't as focused on their team's happiness and productivity. And in the worst cases, you have people who their life's goal is to work at this company, and once they achieve that, they have no perspective on career advancement, and either for themselves or for the people that they're responsible for. And that to me just seems like it's a slow death of the company.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
You know who comes to mind when you just said that? Nick Saban, Alabama college football coach.
Oh, how come?
He mentioned this once to the press. High performers don't like low performers. Low performers do not like high performers. So
interesting.
Right. And he's really tough on his student athletes, his staff, his team. Kind of like when you think about a startup, right? I'm not necessarily saying you have high performers and they're good, but they have an objective. They have an objective because that's how they're built, that's how they're wired, and they execute in a particular style and fashion. And for a company to have that kind of accelerated growth, you need that kind of mindset, behavior, ambition. I'm not going to judge it saying it's good or bad. None of that is sustainable for long periods of time. That's why you have runners who sprint 100 and 200. You don't typically find them even in a 400 meter or 800 meter for that matter, right? So you have different body styles, different muscle groups that actually help depending on what run that you're doing. So same thing with these companies. When they reach a certain level, they have saturated and hit critical mass.
Right.
So now you're playing the game of, can I extend the half-life period of this company? So you have different set of players who can now push it out. So the original high performers, they cannot operate in this new environment.
Right.
And that is, if you look historically over all these companies, every single company, whether it be Intel from the past, Google from much later, then Amazon from early 2000s, Netflix from after that, they all go through that. Let's take Oracle, for example, right? I'd like to talk about a lot of these old big companies that made it big. I love to call them glacial dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Right? And I see something very interesting happening with Oracle is where, if you have no choice but to survive, you're going to figure things out. And I'm seeing them trying to figure things out. Because let's take it. They came, they dominated. Then you had Salesforce come in. Salesforce was dominating, and they still are for the most part. Then you have Workday come in. Everyone's eating some piece of the pie. Like every single person knows who's applying for jobs right now, regardless of the company, it's a Workday application that is the first point of entry for the applicant tracking system that digests that resume. Everyone knows that, right? At some point, it was always Salesforce. At some point, it was only Oracle, like Siebel. It was like the poison of choice. So things are going on changing. So companies will saturate and someone else will come in and eat some piece of the pie. So all of this is just natural progression. So those high performers, they are going to go to another place or start a new company where they're experiencing that. So people are just living and working in places that is conducive to how their mind is already predispositioned to operate.
That's a really good insight. And it totally makes sense. Like the logic of that is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it's also not the standard narrative, and I think that's one of the places people get trapped is they've heard, it's kind of like you start off talking about how in an Indian family, you have to become an engineer or a doctor. Like you had two choices, right? It was binary. And so like, how did your dad get into marketing? His parents must've been so mad at him. But that kind of a fixed structure,
right?
On the one hand, it gave you a bunch of engineering options, right? If you're going to go become a doctor, you've got some options. You're going for pediatric oncology, or are you going to be a brain surgeon or podiatrist? Like what are you going to do, right? Could you want to
hear something? Yeah, you want to hear something fun?
What's that? Okay, what?
Yeah, I'm an engineer. Guess what's my sister?
Oh, she's got to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Every family has to have one of each side of the spectrum. Is that how it works?
Right. I guess so.
Yeah. There's a silent agreement that it has to work that way. Yeah. That's so wild. Yeah. I got none of that growing up.
Yeah.
Like my parents were like, do whatever you want to.
Yeah. And so I quit engineering. I got into customer facing roles, global organization, what have you. I started a business. Guess what my sister has done after all these years?
She runs a hospital.
No, she started her own business.
Oh, nice.
A cloud kitchen. So she's a chef. And she's an influencer and stuff like that. She's
my God, that's amazing.
She's done being a doctor. Now we get to live our life.
Okay, good. Yeah. Is that another one of those kind of silent rules? Like once you get old enough to have gray hair, then you can dump the original career and go do something else?
You figured it out. You figured it out, Bill. Yeah,
I'm gonna write a handbook for Indian families, so that the kids around here who are struggling with their mental health because they're like, I don't want to be a doctor or an engineer, and that's what my mom and dad are pushing me towards. that they know that they've only got to do it for 20 years.
Exactly.
Or they can color, you know what? Here's the thing, you can hack it. At 25, you can start to color your beard or your hair gray. And
there
that
you go.
will get out of the system.
There you go. There you go.
Oh,
No, there's a lot of wisdom in what you said, because sometimes if people know that this is not forever,
right.
they won't feel imprisoned.
Yeah. It's huge. Yeah. My partner works in mental health with middle school, high school, and college students. And that is a recurring theme. Is kids that feel like they're trapped, they're in prison, they can't get out of this box, and they really want that freedom, but their family's like, nope, you got to be an engineer. And they're like, I hate engineering. And I think part of it is you have to frame the education in an exciting context. Like if you can, my older son didn't like math, or younger son, sorry, didn't like math, didn't like physics, like just wasn't excited about any of that. And then he got interested in fast cars. And all of a sudden now he's like, this stuff makes sense now.
There you go.
Being math and physics and like in love with it because of the fast cars. Right.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. They should have had go-kart racing as a teaching implement when he was in middle school.
Yep.
Because a ton of kids would have been like,
not all the kids, but ton of kids would have actually gravitated towards math and physics because of that. Yep, you're right.
Exactly. Yeah. It would have been so easy. Yeah. So the people that aren't, is there a carrot methodology to get the people that are resistant to coaching to see it as beneficial? Yeah,
and I think regardless, I'm not going to change people, but I'm going, to your point, give them a carrot, why it will incentivize them. I don't want it to get to the point where they're getting laid off, like what's happening right now all around us, right? And then they step in, and it's kind of hard. This takes months, and I'm trying to make it digestible. Like I've already gotten years worth of content and coaching down to 3 months. I don't know if can I compress it even further, and I'm figuring it out. But people still have to, put in the work and become fire, walk on fire, walk through fire, become fire. But this is what I really feel. And I need your opinion and perspective on this as well. When I think about money, I used to say, no, I'm not that interested in, what's my pay? I'm not going to negotiate when I was an engineer. But this is what I really understand about money. When I get paid what I deserve, and I get paid high, especially when I get paid high, it doesn't translate into me buying a fancy car or, buying expensive things or showing that I have money. It's not about that. It allows me to have some sense of freedom, that I don't have to deal with toxic bosses, toxic companies, and I can move. So it gives me time to find another job.
Yep.
I think people, regardless of, their leaders, they don't want to change. Can they establish more freedom for themselves and people that they care?
Yeah.
And there are two ways. One is they can get more money for themselves when I help people do that. And two, when they are at work, can they resolve the same thing faster? Can they head out the door at 5 p.m. and not have to sign in and log in again at 9 after putting the kids to bed? Can they actually do stuff that really matter? Go to a wine bar, go to a jazz bar, go to a kids' soccer game. All that matters at the end of the day. Right? Can they sign off of work and still get paid more?
Right.
And be satisfied that they are leading others and creating win-win situations. And I think people would want that. Get paid more and work less hours. Who wouldn't want that? And I'm not saying like you're going to manipulate or cheat people. No, you're actually getting more work done. But can you do it in less hours? And I think that's a good carrot for people to realize that they can do that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I think, the nuance there is, how do you define getting more done, right? And unfortunately, if you work in a factory where you're putting together the left front wheel assembly on a car, and you've got to do 50 a day, and the assembly line moves at this particular speed, you're kind of trapped in that time box. And even if you figure out how to optimize and you could potentially get 50 cars done in 6 hours rather than 8, you got everybody else in the room and they can't do it, right?
Great point.
And so yeah.
So I think this is a great point, and let's bring it back to tech and a
Yeah.
leader and managers and individual contributors, software engineers, whoever that might be. To your point, if I'm doing a particular task and it takes me 8 hours to do it, what is really expected of me, and I want this expectation to be on myself, that can I do it in 3 hours? Does it mean that I've documented it? Have I automated it? Step one. Step two, are there 3, 4, 5, 8, many other people doing the same thing? Can the documentation help them? Can the automation help them?
Yep.
So now you're compounding the effect, the outcome, the time to deliverable. So instead of 6 to 8 weeks, as a team, now you're doing it in 2 to 3 weeks. You're reducing that, right? So as a manager, and that's how you go from an IC to a manager. Are you scaling? Are you now supervising others to bring in that? And there's a dollar amount that you can add, like do the math, fun stuff for a different day. Now the same thing, you can think, oh, instead of 6 weeks, it takes 2 weeks. So do I need 5 people to do it, or can I just do it with 2? That is a rich mindset versus a wealthy mindset. And last time I checked, we live in a capitalist country. Last time I checked, there's a reason why everyone in the globe who wants to come and become a citizen here and live in this country is because of the wealthy mindset that this country was built upon. So instead of saying that, oh, I can do more with less, with the same number of people, can I do even more? To your point, instead of only producing sedans, can I also now start producing SUVs? Because I still have the same people who are already trained and can do it. Can I now go and build another factory, get a business loan, and start increasing my product line? I think what companies are doing right now, they're tightening the budget and trying to see, okay, can I do the same with fewer people? And that's a rich mindset. It only takes you so far. But a wealthy mindset allows you to truly expand. And that's how all these companies actually even started to begin with, along with the high performers. You had a CEO or a startup founder who was not necessarily very technical, but he had a smart technical guy who would burn the midnight oil and do all the hard stuff. But they were thinking, not can I do more with less? Can I do even more with what I have? Or can I get even more people to hire and scale? And I think that is where companies can actually get better. And that mindset cannot come unless you have skin in the game or you're open to this learning even without it. Like people like you and me, if we have to scale our business, I have to hire someone. I need them to do the work that, even though I would like to do video editing, I'd like to build coursework, I need to hire someone to do that so I can actually grow. I spoke a lot. I don't want to keep rambling.
No, that was awesome. Have you so one of the things that struck me there as I was thinking about that is the different mental models people have around businesses. Have you read Rework by Jason Fried?
No, it's going to go on my list.
Okay, so he has a really interesting perspective. That he has a couple of interesting perspectives. One of them is that the company that they founded is making enough money and it's big enough, and he doesn't want to be a billionaire. And that they have a very high profit margin and they pay everybody really, really well. And that they're very focused on their market niche. And that he wants higher quality thinking, less time at work. And so he's got a series of very interesting company behaviors about when people have to clock out, because he wants less hours but higher quality to keep but also because he's like, this is all we do. We are going to really focus on making these coffee mugs. That's it, right? We're going to, and we know the market for these coffee mugs is orders of magnitude more than we're making today. So we keep growing organically slowly. So we're good. and we want our people to have good lives and be happy and like go watch your kids play soccer, right? Take their wife out to the wine bar, like whatever it happens to be. He wants that to happen because he sees the quality of the time when people are at work going up. It's a different way of hacking the human productivity angle, right? And that always fascinates me because I'm a huge fan of working in flow.
Right.
And so because I noticed my productivity and everybody else I've ever worked with who could get into flow, when the productivity cranks up like that, it's a very worthwhile investment, in my mind.
That's absolutely right. In terms of how do you stay productive? Do you work 10 hours being mediocre productive, or do you say, like, for example, the Pomodoro technique and you're in flow, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. I think I sense that. So there's tremendous value. Now, like a coin has two sides, heads and tails. So you cannot ignore one side over the other. So the other side of that coin is you keep doing the same thing without change, you can become obsolete. Exactly. So while this is important, you need to be careful that things are not changing. You're not turning into the boiling frog parable.
Right, exactly. Right? Yeah, totally.
So as long as you're doing a balance of the two, absolutely. Yeah. I think what people fail to do is they focus on one over the other, and that's where things fall apart. So you're always in hyper growth mode, or you're in I'm settled. So you cannot be in one over the other. There are times that you can change and pivot, and even your organization can be structured. And I think that's how companies used to be. There was one that was sustainable, and then the other one was pushing the boundaries. And you would pump in money accordingly. And there are external forces, like the elections are coming up. You have the economy going through its whatever cycle that it needs to go through. So those factors, you do adjust a little bit, but all of this is just being aware. But there's no one size fits all. Right. I think that's my key takeaway here.
No, I like that. Totally makes sense. Yeah. And I think for me, Jason's perspective is really interesting as a data point in the equation.
Yes.
And they've already done a ton of, late night, burning the midnight oil work.
Right.
They've done all the work to get the airplane flying. And now the airplane's flying, it's actually got really good fuel economy, and they don't have to worry about coming back down to get more fuel for a really long time. They're doing midair refueling, and so that's that's kind of the way it's operating, is totally stretching the metaphor there. But this has been super cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've already been here for an hour, so I want to be respectful of time.
Yes.
How can people get hold of you?
There are a few ways to get a hold of me. One is they can find me on LinkedIn, Suraj, Suraj, Ethirajan, Ethirajan. We can use it in a sentence in a different time. This is not spelling bee competition. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on YouTube with the company name Grow You Now. It's a fun play on words, GROUNOW. So Grow You Now. So those are two ways to get in touch with me, or via email, suraj@growyounow.com.
Beautiful. Okay. And I'll put links in the show notes for how to get hold of you. So they'll be able to, that'll be able to work. This has been super cool. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, Bill. I'm excited to have a great weekend, and I hope you have an even better weekend.